Hello again. This is my last video on the three notes of Franciscan spirituality and life that I started. I started with the one on humility, and the next one was on that very distinctive Franciscan note of joy. And I try and bring in some of the things that I've learned on my walk here about living into these three notes of humility, joy, and love. And love is the one I'm going to talk about today. It's the one that's, it isn't unique to Franciscan spirituality by any means, because in essence, it's at the center of all Christian living. It is the way. When Jesus talks about, I am the way, the truth, and the life, for me, that means the way that he shows us is the way of love, because it's sandwiched right between, in John's Gospel, that the great commandment he gives his disciples in chapter 13 of St. John's Gospel, which is, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. By this the whole world will know that you are followers of me, if you love one another. And then in chapter 15, which is actually today's gospel, because it's the 14th of August, today's gospel is chapter 15, where again he says, my commandment for you is to love one another as I've loved you. And you're my friends if you follow my commandments, which is, my command is to love one another. It's as simple as that. So right at the heart of Christian living is this commitment to loving one another. And this is why Christian life, Christian living, the way of Christ, the way of Jesus, cannot be lived individually. You can't be an individual Christian, as it were. And this is where Francis understood. You have to be in community in order to be able to exercise love for one another. You can't love other people if you're nowhere near them. You need some proximity. And so therefore, this is why Christians have always developed communities of faith and love, because that's the deepest calling of all Christians, is to love one another. And for Francis, this is what motivated him in his life, that he saw that the love that Jesus showed in his life and in the way that in the Gospels was the true calling of all faithful Christians. And for Francis, that was to go to the edges of his society, of his day, to the lepers, to the poor, to the destitutely poor. They didn't have the welfare systems that some of us in Western countries enjoy, that social safety net. But he went to those for whom the society of their day did not work well for, in order to love them with the fullness of every ounce of his being, as it were, following that other great two commandments that Jesus reminded us of, which was to love God with every ounce of your being and to love your neighbor as yourself, which all the scriptures hang on, both the law and the prophets. And then he also knew, Francis knew how to follow Jesus's other great commission, which was that love oughtn't just be for those within our immediate circle, those for whom we see, but it should extend to love of those for whom we consider our enemies as well. And we see that perhaps in Francis's life in a couple of ways, actually. First and foremost, perhaps the fact that he was able to go and to express such love and to receive such love from the Sultan when he visited him in Egypt during the crusade, where Francis and his brother Brother Friar went and met with the Sultan at the time, and the two were Francis and the Sultan were able to connect at a deep spiritual level and express love for one another, even though they disagreed on issues of faith. So Francis and the Sultan were able to meet as equals, as people who were able to love and appreciate each other, and the strength of their faith in their respective religions. And both went away not having converted the other to their position, but having loved one another. And from that moment on, Francis held the Islamic understanding and faith in great esteem and respect. It certainly came part of the Franciscan way after that. But Francis also learnt to love those enemies closer to home. You know, we hear of the story about how effectively the Franciscan community, the Franciscan movement, was ripped from Francis's hands and placed into the hands of people who wanted to water down the message that Francis was trying to convey. You know, the community that Francis had developed, the rule of life that he had developed for the community, was quite strict and quite stringent, particularly around the issues of poverty and ownership and possession of things. And there were many that thought they were too strict and wanted to water it down. Well, out of love for the community, Francis chose to step back and allow others to take over the leadership of the Franciscan brothers, which must have been exceptionally painful to Francis to see his fellow brothers rejecting much of why he was doing what he was doing and not following in the same sort of vein. But one might say that actually enabled the Franciscan movement to continue across the centuries and to become still a powerful force for Christ in this world. But the love that the Franciscan is called to, and I would say all of Christians are called to, is not this parochial love that we so often see in our world, the love of our own, except for, you know, the fact that we first learn to love first as within our families. Hopefully our families and our immediate circles of friends and such offer us a wonderful mirror of what love looks like, what God's love looks like. You know, I know that not all families and not all people experience that in their immediate family, but that's the hope. The hope is that our families and our friends are our first contact with what love looks like and are a good mirror to give us a sense of that. But it shouldn't stay there. For the Franciscan, it's not a parochial love. It's, you know, Francis talks about the whole world being very much the parish of the Franciscans. So the whole world is our parish. So first of all, we learn to love because of what those who mirror love to us as children, our friends and our family. And then often we then extend our love to a broader group, our tribe, as it were. You know, whether that's a nation state, whether it's you have a love for Australia or Britain or Wales or all these sort of slightly larger groups, or your church or your religion, you know, your other Christians perhaps, they're your tribe. And and your love hopefully extends out to that larger group as well. But again, that can become quite parochial. And Francis warns us against that. For Francis, the love of God extends beyond that. And hopefully, when we learn to love our tribe and those who resemble us most closely, and that we have some affiliation with, whether that be fellow Christians or other types of tribes that we may belong to, hopefully that motivates us and enables us to do the final one. Oh, we've got the sounding of the half hour there. There's lots of bells in France. Hopefully that mirroring that we have had from our families and then from our larger tribe will then enable us to do the final step that love's all about, which is it's the love of all creation, the whole of humanity, the whole of the created order. And we see that overflowing in Francis. The fact that the Franciscans were a missional group. He sent brothers to Spain. He himself went to Egypt to the Sultan, as I mentioned. The Franciscan, the love that the Franciscans had for the whole of God's creation and the world extended by going out and extending that love to all parts of the world. And that's what we're called to, not just as for me as a Franciscan, but first and foremost that's what I'm called to. That for me, that's the gospel, to spread the love of God to all corners of the world, to all peoples, but not just to all peoples, to the whole of creation. And we see that certainly in Francis, don't we? That this sense that Francis was able to see his deep connection to the whole of the created world. That wonderful, beautiful canticle of the creatures, of Brother Sun, where he understood that we are siblings, we're brothers and sisters with the whole of creation, all that goes on. We are created from the same essence. We're all stardust, as they say, but formed and shaped by the hand of God and made in the image of God. And therefore, that love ought to extend to the whole of creation, of other sentient beings and all sorts of things, and to seek for me, what that Christian love looks like is to seek the welfare and well-being, the flourishing and the thriving of all humanity and creation, the whole of creation. That's what love looks like. It's not about your touchy-feely emotions, whether you feel a sense of love towards another person or creature or the environment. You may feel those things, but the Christian call to love goes deeper than that. It's a choice, which is to actively seek the well-being and welfare, the flourishing and thriving of the other person, of the other parts of creation, as I sit in this absolutely beautiful garden in the middle of France. That's what love looks like. That's why it's a choice. That's why we can love our enemies, because we don't have to have those touchy-feely emotions towards them, but we can still actively seek towards their well-being and welfare and their flourishing, as much as we hope that they might come to the point where they could seek that for us as well. So I hope this expands, but I haven't really talked about how that I've seen that here on my journey. But I think you've probably got glimpses of that. The the people I've met along the way, both those who I knew beforehand and those who are new to me, Sandrine and Julien and their family, Marie-Nage and Françoise, Christian and Martine, Pam and Igma, and all of those, Chris here, who I know exceptionally well, have all extended their love to me. They have all sought my welfare and my well-being, my flourishing, and wanted to support the continuation of my journey on this pilgrimage. And your well wishes, all the messages I've received via various forms of social media and text messages along the way have sustained me, both spiritually and emotionally, and sometimes even physically. And that's what love looks like. That's what the extension of love looks like in this world. And that's what I hope to bring as first and foremost a follower of Jesus's way, and doing that within a Franciscan perspective, is to bring, hopefully I bring that love to the people I meet as well. So I hope that it's not too much of a rant for you. But you can never talk too much about love, because God is love, and that's the heart of all that happens within the heart, within God, and within those who seek to follow the way that God shows us. Well, God bless. Keep well.